Okay, here we go again. Hopefully this works for everybody this time. I'm going to start over one more time just in case people missed it. My name is Lindsay Dunn. I'm a PA and a registered dietitian over at Eastern Idaho Spine Sport and Rehab. Over here, I specialize in hormone manipulation, thyroid hormone, sex hormones, and insulin, and that's where intermittent fasting comes in, is with manipulation of insulin. I would love to have questions throughout the session, so if you have any questions, please send them through. I'll get to them at the end. And I would like to start out with just one question I get all the time, especially from colleagues, is well, why? Why did you start looking into intermittent fasting? Well, the number one reason I looked into it was just simply because my patients were not having very good success with weight loss. As a dietitian, we were doing a lot of calories in versus calories out, low calorie diet, those kinds of things, and patients were working really hard. They were cutting back calories, they were watching what they were eating, they were busting their butts at the gym, and they were not losing weight. And so finally you get to the point where you say, well, maybe it's me, maybe it's the advice I'm giving, maybe this is something I need to look into, do some more research on so I can be a better advocate for my patients. And that's what I found with intermittent fasting. My success with patients now is huge. Probably 95% success rate with weight loss just by incorporating the intermittent fasting. The best thing about the intermittent fasting is it's pretty quick results, pretty effortless results, and that is very motivating to the patients to then add further things to their diet and to their lifestyle. So something I really love to do. I like to use, Dr. Jason Fung's probably my favorite intermittent fasting guy. I use a lot of his analogies, so if you've read his books, pardon the repeats, but he says in his research or in his books that, you know, Biggest Loser is a great example of calories in versus calories out not working. You know, these people go and they go on very low calorie diets, they go very high intensity, high calorie expenditure exercise, and we never see them again after they've lost the weight. And the likelihood of that is because they've gained it all back. It's not a sustainable way to lose weight. It's not a sustainable way to maintain weight. And so let's talk about something that is. So the other reason I really like it, and we'll talk about it more as the slides go on, is that I call it the no excuse diet. Doesn't cost you money, doesn't take time, you don't have to eat stuff you don't like. And so it's another great reason to incorporate it into your lifestyle. So now onto the slides. So intermittent fasting, here we're going to talk a lot about manipulating your insulin in order to help manipulate your weight and your overall health. First question I often get is this just another fad diet? Well, no, it's not just another fad diet. We've been doing it since the beginning of human existence. You know, it wasn't a choice back in the caveman days, but obviously they were able to survive with very prolonged fasts, you know, not intentional, but very prolonged, and they did fine. It's been only in the last several decades, maybe even a little bit longer, that society's created this world where we can eat as often and as much as we want. It's not a good habit. If you look at the nation today, we're very obese and we are very sedentary and we have more comorbid conditions than ever before. The other problem is that all that eating isn't challenged by increase in activity and exercise. And so really none of us can justify eating as much and as often as we do. So why do we eat like that? Well, and it's pretty simple answers, because we can. Food's available everywhere. It's on every street corner, it's in our desk drawers, it's in our diaper bags, it's in our car. We have it everywhere. We use it for everything. Celebrating, mourning, socializing, boredom, you name it, we use food for all these things that it wasn't intended for. Third reason, and it's a very good reason, is food tastes good. You know, I love food. Don't get me wrong. It tastes good. It gives me pleasure. The problem is the pleasure is addictive, and therefore we want to do more of it. Tastes good, makes me feel good. I'm going to keep doing it. Lastly, and a physiologic reason for why we eat like we do, is that eating food stimulates your insulin. Insulin, in turn, makes us hungry, especially makes us crave carbs. So we crave carbs, we crave food, we eat more, we make more insulin. It's a vicious cycle. So how do we shut it down? We manipulate your insulin. So insulin, I keep using that word. What is insulin? Insulin is a hormone in our bodies that regulates our energy utilization. So it takes the energy that we eat and it makes us do something with it. So it takes the glucose that gets into our blood from the food we eat, and it can store it either as glycogen or as fat. Glycogen is our short-term energy storage. It's the place where we initially store our energy. It's in our liver, it's in our muscle, but it's a short supply. So it's only got a certain capacity that can hold. After that, after we fill up those glycogen stores, we convert it to fat, and that's our long-term energy storage. way that we can utilize that energy without insulin is exercise. So again, but you have to be exercising. It's not before exercise, it's not after exercise, it's during, and many of us don't do that as often as we could or we should. So here's a little pictograph on that to help it make a little bit more sense, and to go back to Dr. Jason Fung and his analogies. He likes to compare the glycogen stores, or our short-term energy stores, to a refrigerator, and our long-term energy stores to a freezer. So, you know, our fat is our freezer. So how does this all work? So we eat, and the lady in the picture is eating sugar, of course. We eat sugar, our insulin goes up, we store as much sugar as we can in our glycogen stores until they're full. We eat more sugar, and then the excess goes into our freezer or into our fat stores. So insulin is a big player in all of this, and the amount of insulin we have can also be a big player in this. And then in the bottom is that little bit about, you know, you can use energy without insulin by using the GLUT4 with exercise. So why is this important to us? What does it matter? Well, I'm sure many of you have heard the term insulin resistance. Insulin resistance happens when we have increased levels of insulin. What causes increased levels of insulin is carbohydrate intake. You know, the typical American diet, unfortunately, right now. I like to tell my patients and compare insulin resistance on a scale. I think everybody has a certain level of insulin resistance. Those with what we would call a high metabolism probably have very low insulin resistance, and those with what we would call a low metabolism have very high levels of insulin resistance and probably a diagnosed insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. So these people have, you know, 2 times, 4 times, 6 times the amount of insulin that we should have. So what's the problem with that? Well, that increased insulin makes you store more fat. It also makes you hungry, and it also makes you crave sugar and carbs. And so having increased insulin is a very unfortunate situation, because physiologically you have become this superhuman fat storing machine, and you're hungry and you're craving carbs all the time. So what do we do about it? Well, the good news is we can control our own insulin. Insulin is something that our body responds to based on what we eat. So a couple of things that we can do. One, the topic of the conversation today is reduce the frequency of eating by incorporating intermittent fasting. So pretty simple, and we'll talk about some more. Another way to manipulate your insulin is to reduce your intake of sugars and simple carbohydrates. And then the third way is to incorporate more healthy fats, especially in place of those simple carbohydrates in the diet. And we'll talk about why that is. So back to another picture. So how do we lower insulin? Let's look at this pattern that we keep creating for ourselves. You know, we eat sugar, our insulin goes up. We have more hunger and more carbohydrate craving, so we eat more sugar, our insulin goes up some more, and you can see what this vicious cycle creates. We're just in this unfortunate situation where there is a true physiologic craving for these foods, and unfortunately the only way to break that is to have a moment of willpower where we can stop that eating of the sugar and the carbohydrate intake. And the intermittent fasting is where that comes in. So let's do this. Let's talk about intermittent fasting and how it's going to slow down or even shut off your insulin production. The reason this happens is because if you can go a prolonged period of time without eating, that insulin is not activated, it's not stimulated, we don't use it. The other thing that we can do is to reduce the amount of foods that stimulate insulin production. This little list I have here gives the foods in the order of severity that cause insulin stimulation. So high fructose corn syrup is the number one culprit. It stimulates the most insulin, and unfortunately our body doesn't metabolize it very well, and it causes all kinds of problems. So I tell my patients it's a pretty straightforward, you can't do it, don't do it, do not eat high fructose corn syrup. And then we start talking about other foods that are a little bit more difficult to avoid. Your simple carbohydrates. So these, I never thought I'd say it as a dietitian, but I say it every day as a PA. These are your white carbs. So your sugar, your white breads, your white rice, your white pasta, rolls, crackers, those kinds of things. Those are all simple carbohydrates. Your complex carbohydrates are next on that list of foods that stimulate insulin, and those include your brown carbs, your whole grains, your whole wheat bread, your brown rice, whole wheat pasta, and then also your starchy vegetables. Next on the list is protein. Yes, protein does stimulate insulin, but in a very small way. So protein is a good choice as far as keeping that insulin stimulation down. And then notice, fat isn't on this list. Fat doesn't have any effect on insulin whatsoever, which is a great thing for us to be able to do to help manipulate those levels. So what happens when you actually slow down or shut off our insulin production? Well, here's a picture that shows that with intermittent fasting, we're not stimulating insulin. So our body goes ahead and we empty that short-term storage of energy. We empty that refrigerator. we don't have any more insulin. We're still fasting. Well, guess what we have to do? We actually have to tap into that freezer. Let's use some of that adipose tissue we have and use it for energy. Let's keep that insulin shut off. So we have to do that for a prolonged period of time, therefore reducing weight and reducing adiposity. Again, this is where that intermittent fasting is so critical. Dr. Jason Fung, the way he describes it is, you know, those of us that eat 5 or 6 small meals a day, all we're doing is emptying and refilling that refrigerator all day long. We never make ourselves get into our freezer. So by slowing down or reducing the frequency of eating, you actually have to utilize that freezer because your refrigerator is empty. My analogy that I use frequently is it's like driving around in your car attached to a gas pump. You're never going to get the sludge out of the bottom if you're constantly topping it off. All right, next slide. So the next question that I get from patients is, okay, this all sounds great. This sounds like something I could do, but how do I do it? So the most successful way that I've had my patients incorporate this is through a prolonged overnight fast. Most of the research out there shows that a 16-hour overnight fast most days of the week is the most effective and simple way to do that. So what does that look like? Myself, I personally stop eating between 6 and 7 o'clock at night, and I don't eat again until 10 or 11 o'clock the next day. Pretty simple, just skipping breakfast. You know, the hard part for most people is wrapping their brain around the fact that they've been told for decades that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Unfortunately, though, we all have plenty of excess energy stores, and maybe we need to utilize those rather than believing what we've been told for so many years. A couple other ways to fast that might work for you better than the 16-hour overnight fast is just prolonged fasting twice a week. I have several patients that incorporate this and actually really enjoy it. They tell me it gives them a sense of euphoria. It gives them a sense of pride. They feel proud that they're able to accomplish this prolonged fast. They talk to their family and friends, and they all say, how do you do that? That's just as amazing. So it gives them that extra self-esteem, that extra boost, plus it gives them that benefit of a very prolonged intermittent fast. The goal here is to do what works for you. Everything that we talk about today, my goal is to make sure that you can do this for the rest of your life. This isn't a diet, I call that a 4-letter word. This is a lifestyle change. This is something that I want to work for you for the rest of your life, so you don't have to yo-yo diet anymore. The most important thing, and the caveat I have listed there, if you are on insulin, if you're a diabetic and you're on insulin, you absolutely have to do this under your doctor's supervision. Do not try to do this on your own. Here, if you want some more information, if you want to read more about it, if you want to see the evidence-based research that's backing this, Dr. Jason Fung lists it in his books, the Obesity Code or the Diabetes Code, as well as he talks about it and has slides about it on YouTube. So if you want more information, if you think that what you're hearing today sounds good and you want more validation and verification of what I'm talking about, get on YouTube or order one of his books. They're absolutely fantastic. So next question I get is, okay, now I know I'm going to skip breakfast. I'm going to do this intermittent fasting thing, but what do I eat when I'm not fasting? So again, number one goal here is to manipulate insulin. So again, I'm going to reiterate, no high fructose corn syrup. It's not in most foods anymore. Society realizes how harmful it is to you, so they've taken it out of most things, but it's still out there. In your sweetened goods, whatever they might be, high fructose corn syrup is the cheapest way to sweeten things. So pay attention to your labels. Make sure there's no high fructose corn syrup. My favorite way to get people to change the way they eat is the simple old-fashioned plate method. I like this because you can, again, do this anywhere. You can do this at home. You can do this if you're a mother cooking for a family of 6. You can do this if you're a Texas Roadhouse. You can do it if you're at a wedding reception. There's really, again, no excuses to not being able to make the plate method work for you. So what that deals with is, as you can see in the picture, half of your plate is a non-starchy vegetable. A quarter of your plate's a protein. I don't focus on the lean part of it anymore. I just couldn't find a better picture. So any protein is fine. Fish, beef, chicken, pork. And then grains and starchy vegetables in that other quarter of your plate. Here again, I like to focus on those brown ones we talked about. Your whole wheat pastas, your brown rice, your whole grains, or your starchy vegetables, which would be your peas, corn, potatoes, and winter squash. So trying to make your plate look like this is a pretty simple way to eat healthy, to manipulate those macronutrients, to better focus on lowering those insulin levels. The other nice part about it is you don't have to eat vegetables you don't like. You don't have to eat proteins you don't like. You can make these the foods that you prefer, so it's something that you're willing to stick with. Another thing that I really like to incorporate for my patients is, well, what do I, if I'm eating at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's obviously not lunch. What do I do? Well, a lot of times that first meal of the day is more like a snack or a small meal. And in order to keep that insulin level down for as long as we can keep it down, I really, really encourage a high protein, high healthy fat meal as the first meal of the day. Something that I go to very frequently is that unsweetened almond milk chai tea latte with some protein powder in it. There's very little carbs. It tastes great. It's easy to make. I can do it at home, and I'm not stimulating my insulin. But as some other examples, the Greek yogurt with the nuts and chia seeds, an egg frittata, avocado toast with a low-carb bread, any of those things. If you can keep those carbs below 5 or 10 grams, I think you're doing yourself a great deal of good and will reduce those, or that early start of hunger and carb craving and things that we want to avoid, so you can be successful for the rest of the day, and then utilize that plate method the rest of the day. Why does this work? Why is it something that I'm seeing success with in my patients? Why is it something that patients are able to do? So here's some reasons. You store less fat. You utilize more fat. Everybody wants to burn fat rather than store it. You're not as hungry. You crave less carbohydrates. Some other benefits: you can reduce or reverse insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, and all of that central adiposity. I don't think there's one of us out there who wouldn't like to reduce that waistline a little bit, and that's where reduction in insulin really plays a role. The first place it tends to come off is in that midsection. Why should you try it? Well, even if you don't need to lose weight, even if you're not here for the weight loss component of it, there's lots of other health benefits. Obviously obesity and type 2 diabetes we've talked about, but they're now showing research that it's helping in reduction of Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease, fatty liver, helps improve energy levels and improves sleep. When we're feeding ourselves 24/7, it makes it hard for your body to figure out its natural rhythms. Let's create a normal rhythm and slow down on that eating and allow our body to do what it was intended to do. Why do I push intermittent fasting? And I hate to say this, but for me, I really like that no excuse diet. This is something that is easy to do. It will save you money. It will save you time. You don't have to do anything special as far as cooking or buying special foods. You can do it even if the rest of your family doesn't want to do it. You can do it if you have a crazy life. So it's something that's pretty simple. There's no excuses. And again, for me, number one is my patients are having huge success. I thoroughly enjoy weight loss counseling at this point in my career because I feel good about what I'm educating my patients on, and I'm thrilled that they're losing the weight and achieving their goals. What is the best way for you to implement this for yourself personally? Obviously, I would love to meet with you. There's a lot of things involved when it comes to weight loss if you have other comorbid conditions. So we can sit down where I've got my PA background. We can discuss your medical issues, your medications. The other thing I really like to discuss is what were your barriers to your previous weight loss success. A lot of times there's mental issues, there's emotional issues, there's support issues that we can discuss and help you do better with. The important part is to make this a lifestyle change. Make it work for your life. Make it work for something that you're going to be able to sustain so you have lifelong success, not just yo-yo dieting, short-term stuff. So anyway, now this is your opportunity for questions. I tried to keep it short so we had time for that. Again, I apologize for the delay to getting started, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Are there any?
Not yet, but it lags behind about 20 seconds.
Okay. Just for everybody's information, if you don't know where Eastern Idaho Spine Sport and Rehab is, we're over off of Washington Parkway. If you'd like to call and make an appointment, the number here is 208-535-4343. I'm only here 2 days a week, but my schedule's fairly open. And so if you'd like to meet or discuss this further, I'd obviously love to visit with you. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and get off. If you did not get to watch this live and you're watching it at a later time, please go ahead and still send some questions through. I'll keep an eye on it for the next couple of days and answer questions when they come across. Anyway, thanks, everybody. Have a good day.